Hi all, it's Thursday again, and this is the Truth, Honour and Integrity. Today's date is September the 13th, and we've got quite a show for you here tonight. Hammers everywhere. Right, this is the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams. I hope you enjoy the show. And stick it to them we will. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. My name's Thomas Williams. I hope you enjoy tonight's show. I have a feeling you will. The theme of the second hour and the third hour, as we may not get to Q&A tonight, is consequences of actions. We did warn and they didn't heed. Right, you can look forward to that after we do the usual news and views around the world. And let's get some of the details of the show. To the person who said I mustn't do www anymore, I won't be doing that, but I just did. Right, the links for the show is Spreaker.com/user/8955881. You can also listen live on thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have the archives of all the THI shows, including the must-listen-to shows on the ground and centering and shielding and self-empowerment documents also. So that's all on thinkdifferent.thepeoplesclub.org. We have the Facebook page, Truth, Honour and Integrity, which is easier to find, and the Facebook alternative social media without all the issues on MeWe.com. And if you're struggling to find it, that's also Truth, Honour and Integrity. You can send an email, which you can also use the same email for comments and also questions. And the email for the show is truth.honour.and.integrity@gmail.com. We have the People's Club website link, all about the foundation when it gets rolling, and that's at thepeoplesclub.org, and my Patreon if you wish to contribute to these shows. And you can go on patreon.com/TommyW/memberships. Right, where do we start? Oh boy. One thing I want to say, because before we get into the news, is the increase in interest in THI and the trust is going through the roof. And I know I've been sent a lot of friend requests on Facebook. I do not accept friend requests on Facebook. It's nothing against you, but if you've got something that needs to be addressed, then you can always send it by the email, Truth, Honour and Integrity, or you can just send me a private message if it's something else. But if it's just a basic friend request, then I add very few, for the simple reason it's a backdoor into your computer. So apologies for that. Right, the news, which kind of pales in comparison to what's to come. Right, where are we? Right, Brazil first. A front runner in Brazil's presidential election, Jair Bolsonaro, has been stabbed during a campaign rally this week. You're going to see a lot of this fun and games. And the far-right politician was attacked in the midst of a crowd in the southeastern state of Minas Gerais. Hope I've pronounced that correct. He underwent surgery for injuries to his intestines, but is expected to recover. Now, this particular politician is fairly controversial, and it has outraged many in Brazil with racist and homophobic comments. But he had performed strongly in recent polls, and the polls suggest he would get most votes in the next month's presidential elections if former President Lula da Silva fails in his attempt to overturn a ban on him standing. I think we covered that news item a couple of months ago. He was banned due to corruption and fraud, which is the common term for many other things these days. Twitter has permanently suspended the accounts of Alex Jones and Infowars. Now, this is quite a move after a number of tweets that violated, according to them, Twitter's abusive behaviour policy, and a number of tech giants, including YouTube and Facebook, deleted the right-wing conspiracy theorists' content last month, citing it was down to hate speech. And Mr. Jones is in a lot of trouble. He's currently being sued for defamation by the parents of 2 children that were allegedly killed in the 2012 Sandy Hook elementary school shooting, which he has claimed was a hoax, and I support that. And the Twitter said that the ban was a result of new reports of tweets and videos posted last week that violate our abusive behaviour policy, really, in addition to accounts past violations. Now, Jones is using this as a stick, as look, they're stifling freedom of speech, when the man has been co-intelpro the whole time he's been on the radio. I've warned of this for long enough, and he will go down, Jones. I don't think the alternative media are going to look too kindly upon him when he really gets exposed. And his sidekick, Mr. Causey, will go down as well. Both of them are Mossad agents. You know, at the end of the day, Jones has helped many people wake up. But it's all part of the fishing technique. They give you elements of truth and then spew out a whole heap of rhetoric and distractions. But he has woken people up, as many of the others who have been exposed as being part agents or all agents. So, you know, we need to give him credit for that. But he was paid rather nicely for it. $3 million a year in advertising alone from the same corporate giants that we're trying to get rid of, or at least repackage or repurpose. Mexico. This is going to be the first of many disclosures in Mexico. It's not very pleasant, but there's an increasing number that are now being found. And the skulls of at least 166 people have been found in a mass grave in Mexico's eastern state of Veracruz. And the state prosecutor, Mr. Winkler, said the skulls and other human remains have been there for at least 2 years. Now, the exact location has not been disclosed for security reasons and ongoing investigations. But drug traffickers in particular have used Veracruz as a dumping ground for their victims for many years, and yet the Mexican government did nothing about it, which is why Trump was going on about Mexico not doing enough. Part of the problem is a lot of the government were involved in it. Now, in March 2017, 250 skulls were found in another mass grave there. Mr. Winkler told reporters that investigators had also found about 200 items of clothing, more than 100 identity cards and other personal belongings. Now, officials are focusing on the skulls to work out the exact number of victims. It's kind of not quite clear. And they're using drones and ground-penetrating radar to help locate the remains. And forensic experts are still working at the scene. He also ruled out that it was possible that they would find a lot more victims, and relatives of the people who have disappeared in Mexico have long been campaigning for more to be done to help them find their loved ones. And drug-related violence in Mexico has soared since 2006. When the army was deployed to fight the powerful cartels. The army weren't exactly clean either. It was more to do, it's a bit like faction fighting really, one wanting more control, cut out the middlemen. And since then, more than 200,000 people have been killed, and that's including a record 28,702 last year alone. Another 37,000 people are registered as missing, and victims also include cartel members, but also migrants heading to America who refuse to be recruited. Now you know why we need the wall. I suggest it may be symbolic. We have other options without building a physical wall that can be delivered, and maybe it will. We'll see. More violence by the American police force, I'm sad to say. And a man was killed late last Thursday when a Dallas police officer returning home from her shift entered the wrong apartment in her building and opened fire. Really? Now, details surrounding the death of Botham Shem Jean, who was 26, were not immediately made available early Friday. Go figure, they always cover up. And police said in a statement that preliminary information suggests the officer involved called for help and told responding officers that she entered the victim's apartment believing it was her own. And this was in the Southside Flats, which is an upscale apartment complex directly south of Dallas's downtown. I believe she's on administrative leave, and she's also been charged since then, I think. US Marines conducted a live-fire aerial assault exercise in southern Syria on Friday, designed to warn Russian and other military forces to stay away from an American base there. Now, the exercise, involving a company-sized unit, came amid rising US-Russia tensions across the Syrian battlefield, and the Trump administration had warned both Russia and the Syrian government against a planned offensive in Idlib province in northwest Syria. That will be the final battle. That's why all the attention. And the largest remaining pocket of rebel fighters who have tried and failed over the past 7 years to oust President Bashar al-Assad. It's not the American military doing that, I'll tell you that for nothing. The clown general is ordering that, and not Trump. There is a name that is those in the alternative community will remember from 3 or 4 years ago. There was a lot of shenanigans going on in Texas, and it all ended up rather sadly for Lavoy Finicum up in Oregon. The Bundys. Now, the governor, the man by the name of Ryan Bundy, has recently announced his campaign for governor of Nevada. And for those of you who don't remember, his dad, brother, friends and fellow cattle ranchers were involved in an event dubbed the Bundy Standoff in 2014. And the standoff with federal authorities started after the Bureau of Land Management stopped allowing Bundy's cattle to graze on the 500,000 acre allotment. Once the restrictions were put in place, the Bundys refused to pay the BLM grazing fees altogether, and they attempted to pay their fees to Clark County instead, but were told they had to pay the BLM. Now, as a penalty for the unpaid fees, the federal authorities attempted to seize the Bundys' cattle, and this is where hundreds of armed supporters sprang to the defence of the Bundys, and the feds were forced to back down in the face of local resistance after some of the snipers were taken out. That's the hidden story behind that. The night before, there was going to be a big shootout started by federal snipers and they were going to fire at the cops and blame it on the supporters of the Bundys. But the snipers got rather spooked that night and stood down. Oh dear. The US has threatened sanctions this week against the International Criminal Court if it goes ahead with prosecutions against Americans. The court is currently considering prosecuting US servicemen over alleged detainee abuse in Afghanistan. National Security Advisor John Bolton, TikTok, called the court illegitimate and vowed the US would do everything to protect our citizens. And the US is among a dozen of nations not to have joined the 2002 founded court, and the first was ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda's request last year for a full investigation into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan, which would include any committed by US military and intelligence officials. Now, on this issue, Mr. Bolton said neither Afghanistan nor any government signatory to the ICC's Rome Statute has made such a request. Now, the second request was the Palestinian move to bring Israel before the ICC over allegations of human rights abuses in Gaza and also the occupied West Bank, a move that was dismissed by Israel as political. Mr. Bolton said the Palestinian move was one of the reasons the US administration has decided to close the Palestinians' diplomatic mission in Washington. I don't agree with any of that. If people have committed crimes, it doesn't matter who they are, they should be held accountable. All people should be held accountable for crimes. And this is more rhetoric, in my opinion, of the SSP and the factions calling the shots and not Mr. Trump. It won't always be that way. Where are we next? Native American tribes in Montana and also South Dakota have now sued the Trump administration as of this Monday, claiming that the approval of the Keystone XL oil pipeline did not adequately analyse potential damage to cultural sites from spills and during this construction. Attorneys for the Fort Belknap and Rosebud Sioux tribes asked a federal court in Great Falls, Montana, to rescind the line's permit issued by the US State Department. The tribes argue President Trump ignored the rights of the tribes when he reversed a prior decision by Barack Obama and approved the project last year. Now, the $8 billion Trans-Canada Corp pipeline would carry up to 830,000 barrels, 35 million gallons of crude daily along an 1,184-mile route from Canada all the way to Nebraska. But it would also pass through the ancestral homelands of the Rosebud Sioux in central South Dakota and also the Fort Belknap Indian Reservation in north-central Montana. Now, for all these are historical, cultural and spiritual places and sites of significance in the path of the pipeline, and they are at risk of destruction, according to the attorneys for the tribes wrote in the lawsuit. Quite why we need 35 million gallons of oil per day when it's 100-year out-of-date technology is beyond my comprehension. But maybe we'll find out why in the second hour. The US regulators have rejected Wells Fargo, as in what the plan to repay customers who were pushed into unnecessary auto insurance. They told the bank that it must do more to ensure it has found and compensated every affected driver. Now, 3 sources familiar with the matter said Wells Fargo gave regulators the plan in June as required by a $1 billion settlement the bank reached with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and also the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency in April. Now, after reviewing the plan, which could involve contacting some 600,000 drivers, the OCC told Wells Fargo it needed more assurances that the bank would find and repay everyone who was overcharged. Now, unfortunately, the bank were not authorised to speak publicly about the rejection, and the rejection is the latest scandal in Wells Fargo's long-running sales scandal, which began in September of 2016 with revelations that the bank had opened perhaps millions of accounts in customers' names without permission to hit aggressive sales targets. Since then, they have disclosed more customer abuses in business, including mortgage lending, wealth management, and the auto loans. Wells Fargo, TikTok. Amazon is trying to justify filing a patent it received for a design that would house human workers in cages. The tech company was granted a patent for the product, and to date it hasn't been used. Back in 2016, under the promises of it would protect workers on warehouse floors. Now, a pair of AI researchers called the proprietary design an extraordinary illustration of worker alienation and a stark moment in the relationship between humans and machines. It was meant to keep workers safe among roaming robots. Really? Moving mountainous shelves of goods that have been ordered by customers. If you fire that psychic attack again, I will not only fry your brain, I will fry your server. Final warning. Amazon executive Dave Clark tweeted that the company hasn't and won't implement the design, and sometimes even bad ideas get submitted for patents. Well, if you're going to file for a patent, you have all intentions of using it. They've just been caught out. Me thinks it's time to put Bezos in a cage. We've had enough of his let's shut down all the smaller businesses and his transhumanist agenda. That's what he's about. Further evidence of where certain people are getting away with cases due to statute of limitations and all that nonsense. That has to be erased. It only protects the so-called elite. Backstreet Boys' Nick Carter has revealed he won't be prosecuted for alleged sexual assault. The report was filed against Carter in February for alleged sexual assault, and the Santa Monica police presented its findings to the DA last month. Now, the assault allegedly took place back in 2003 when the victim was 18 years old, and Carter vehemently denied the accusation. Now, the district attorney office declined the case because the statute of limitations had passed. That has to be changed. If people committed crimes, then they've committed crimes. It's funny how the courts can pass something that was only 3 years prior to Donald Trump's alleged indiscretion with Stormy Daniels, and that is valid, and that all this gets squashed. You see, that's how the portal people work. Now, the family said they were well aware of the likelihood that the case was not prosecutable due to the statute of limitations which apply in California regarding rape, which was modified. This is why I put it in. That law was modified in 2016. I wonder why. When you consider all the Feinstein and Nexium and all the other stuff, Hollywood, they changed the law. Which she said in a statement, it is unfortunate that the law isn't fully retroactive to accommodate assaults that have happened in the past, regardless of how far back. Yes, indeed. They won't get away with it. Now we're getting reports that Donald Trump's planned visit to Ireland for the first time as US President this November has been cancelled, according to the Irish government anyway. But the White House did not immediately confirm the cancellation, saying it was still finalising plans for Trump's November trip to Europe, which involves a trip to Paris, which is on the 100th anniversary of armistice that ended World War I. Now, Sarah Sanders told reporters that no final decision had been made yet, and the President will travel to Paris in November as previously announced. And they are still finalising whether Ireland will be a stop on that trip. Senator Jeff Merkley on Tuesday released documents, the latest in mudslinging that has no validity, but there you go. That appears to show the Department of Homeland Security diverting nearly $10 million from the FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Administration, over to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, the documents that were first reported by Go Figure, MSNBC Rachel Maddow, detailed the agency's funding redirections for the fiscal year 2018 and showed that millions of dollars were diverted to ICE from several agencies. Now, those diverted funds totaling $33.1 million will provide funding in support of higher priority detention and removal requirements than those for which it was originally appropriated, and this is according to the documents. Now, Merkley, the senator, says that he believes the transfer from FEMA to ICE was made this summer, and he told Maddow that it means that just as hurricane season is starting, the administration is working hard to find funds for child detention camps. See how it works? And they said, so $10 million comes out of FEMA when we're facing hurricane season. And knowing what happened last year, and look what happened since, Merkley said, referring to recent hurricane in the Pacific that largely missed Hawaii, and another one, Florence, currently threatening North Carolina and the East Coast. He said, I find it extraordinary. It says that money came from response and recovery right on it. This is how the media and the clowns puppets work. More portal people, drivel and misdirection. Like, since when have they ever cared about whether FEMA got funds or not? Only when they can use it for a political football. So they moved funds from one priority to another. I think, weren't they crying a couple of months ago, oh, the poor children and the poor families, which was a democratic bill that created that, I might remind them. But how about doing a journalistic investigation of the role of FEMA in actual emergencies, like how they and the Red Cross were deliberately blocking aid to the people in Katrina? Like, why haven't they been audited? For me, Rachel Maddow needs to shut her or his treasonous pie hole, creating issues where there is none. Like I said, remember where these same idiots saying Trump wasn't helping the migrant children and families. Now he adds more funds to it, and that's wrong as well. So it doesn't matter what he does, they're going to create an issue to throw mud at him. No wonder their ratings are plummeting. Dear me, with that type of dribble, just a shame that anyone actually listens. Oh, wait for time. Okay. To think it's not that far back that all of us in the alternative community were labelled nuts and crazies over this topic. And yeah, here we are, 2018. It's beyond epidemic proportions now as more and more countries reveal their crimes. The latest one, more than 3,600 children in Germany were assaulted by Roman Catholic priests between 1946 and 2014, a leaked report has now revealed. The study was commissioned by the church itself and was due to be published on the 25th of September. According to the report anyway, some 1,670 clergymen in Germany committed some form of sex attack on 3,677 minors. The church spokesman said it was dismayed and ashamed by the findings. Really dismayed. Now, this report is the latest in a long series of revelations that have uncovered decades of sexual abuse by Roman Catholic priests around the world. And according to a new study, only 38% of the alleged perpetrators have actually been prosecuted, with most facing only minor disciplinary procedures. About 1 in 6 cases involved rape, and most of the victims were boys, and more than half were aged 13 or younger. And the report finds that predatory clerics were often moved to new communities where no warning was issued about their previous actions. And all they can say is they're dismayed and ashamed. Really. The US Food and Drug FDA is considering banning the sale of flavoured e-cigarettes, citing an epidemic of use among teens. And the proposal, which was announced yesterday, is part of a broader effort to curb teen use of the nicotine devices. The FDA chief, Scott Gottlieb, oh dear, no, I won't say it, the disturbing and accelerating trajectory of use we're seeing in the youth and the resultant path to addiction must end. Now you decide that it must end, really. And the toughened approach comes after firms ignored prior concerns, he added, and have been warning the e-cigarette industry for more than a year that they need to do much more to stem the youth trends. In his view, they treated these issues like a public relations challenge rather than seriously considering their legal obligations, the public health mandate, and the existential threat to these products. Well, I'm here to notify them that this prior approach is over. The question remains is, why have they waited this long? And why aren't FDA heads being fired for releasing it when they knew it was more damaging than cigarettes? Oops. FDA needs to be held accountable. Of course, they're the same clowns that brought us aspartame, a hazardous hazmat waste product, passed off as sugar. This will be the final news item before we go into a song that's complimentary. And it highlights, sadly, and we must highlight it because we have to bring these things that are hidden into the light. Child suicide. Gabriel Tay, who took his own life this year, Yeah, and which was just 2 days after another student apparently assaulted Gabriel in a restroom in Carson Elementary in West Price Hill, where he was a student. Now, Samantha Kabersky hung herself with a belt from a crib. She was aged 6. Razy Sellers was 11 when he took his life. Jamail Miles was 9. Now, suicide in elementary school-aged children does remain rare. 53 children aged 11 and younger took their lives last year. Now, the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention has stopped recording the data. As I understand, that has to change. The question is, why did they? But medical professionals and researchers have noted an alarming increase in the last decade, as deaths are now more than double from the time period between 2008 and 2016. But a rising number of young children visiting emergency rooms for suicidal thoughts and attempts, and you'll hear all of these kids taking their lives, and you just don't understand why that is. And this is according to Christine Sellers, which was Raisy's grandmother. I don't know if it's the change in times, the way kids are brought up today, or the peer pressure, but it's just so sad. Hear, hear. Now this is my input. This story highlights what society is doing to children. We've covered many aspects of the crimes against children, but we are turning them into vaccine-induced pincushions, nervous wrecks if they're not the best at school, sport, or pageants. There was a post this week about the lavish expenses of birthday parties. But the same applies to graduation, Halloween and prom parties. Parents competing to outdo each other, and for what? I'll tell you what it is: debt. You cannot sustain that level of totally unnecessary spending, and all you're doing is feeding the beast. So great, your daughter arrives in the most lavish way in an extended limousine. I've seen some arrive in helicopters, replete in attire that appeals to the perverts in society. She is still a child, and many forget that. But the desire to be the best supersedes what is best for the family and the child. It's all an illusion of grandeur, and yet so many go into debt to play that game, completely forgetting the child's needs. You got some children who are forced into doing sports so they will get a scholarship, which means the parents save money. Oh, the irony in that. How about saving money by investing your time to ask the child what the child would like to do? Or spend less on over-the-top parties and ceremonies. We're sending them to schools to be indoctrinated and programmed, with little questioning of the value of teaching that schools provide. And when the child doesn't perform, off they go to a child psychologist. And there you go, have some brain-stunting drugs, that'll help them. And the parents just go, oh, okay, really? Does anyone turn round and question how Ritalin is going to help their child progress when it's stunting their brain rhythms? We have to. Hi all, and welcome back to the second hour. Pin you back your ears. This is a big one. It's a fair hefty chunk of intel. of things that have been going on around the world this week. And like I said at the beginning, it's consequences of actions time. Now, let's get in. I'm going to do a small recap of last week. Due to indiscretions, corruption and meddling with American people and their funds and its acting government also, Manor World Holding Trust, as the owner of the Federal Reserve, revoked their license to hold, trade or transact in US dollars. Now, this essentially ends the Fed. There was a report yesterday that they're struggling badly for liquidity. Well, they're not the only one. Consequences of actions, like I said. Now, some people were sceptical about this and concerned about their accounts, pensions, IRAs, 401ks and social security payments. Rest assured, none of them can be touched or interfered with. Now, what most people are not aware of is the trust pays your social security anyway, and always has. Oops. The social security and Medicare payments that comes out of your wages is another slush fund for the clowns. So, I want people to not have any concerns over that. We have done everything to protect the people and how we operate, and that will not change. The trust has prevented stock market crashes and also the government funding that was given by the trust, all designed to keep people in jobs and also get paid. All this despite receiving little to no support from so-called authorities to date. But that maybe started to change. We'll see. Now, the first intel item is a portion of what took place last week, where the banks used the Hercules system, which is one of the old ones, rejigged and pushed out as some form of new quantum system. It's not. And basically, their clowns convinced all the banks to put all their money on this Hercules system and promised to return it on Friday at 5 p.m. Well, you know what happens next, don't you? They never. Why? Because what they did, they took all the digital money out of the banks. And that digital money cannot be returned to the banks, as it's now classed as new money and is not based on an asset. You know, these people are beyond stupid. So this is why all the banks went into negative liquidation or liquidity. Liquidation may well follow. We'll have more on the banks shortly. The next piece I want to cover is two branches of military in a stand down and a standoff that are not going along with the SSP and their control system. But the big news here is which two stood down or are going against it. Now, traditionally, the Navy have been in full control of all things related to extraterrestrials and also non-terrestrials. And they received major extra budgets for being in charge of that operation. Now, this caused, as time went on, much angst in the Army and in particular the Air Force, as they felt they should be in charge of it all, and subsequently they would then receive more funding. It led to recent arguments within the Majestic 12, being the military branches, between the military branches in that organisation. The Army and the Air Force people involved in Majestic 12 wanted disclosure, and the Navy didn't. Now, this is all down to jealousy over the extra funding. Anyway, the SSP decided to take out all the members of Majestic 12. So they no longer exist. So it comes as a big and pleasant surprise that the Navy and the Marines are going up against the SSP. Big move. Now the SSP and the general close to Trump, who is Black Dragon, are holding this country to ransom, financially, politically, and also technologically. The SS small p have technology way beyond what we have, and have chosen to keep to themselves to date. Although we have, through the peace treaty, denied them full access to underground facilities beyond a certain level, where much of their advanced tech lies. And rest assured, they will not be getting access to that anytime soon. It is they, the SSP, who are holding us back on the free or clean energy sources. They're preferring us to build nuclear facilities. That's why there's all these extra nuclear facilities, plans and building started. But it's not what you think. They're not being used as power outlets, although power can come from it, but something that they can make go boom at any time due to the Stuxnet technology. This is what happened to Chernobyl and also Fukushima. Nuclear plants are being used as targets for the respective countries who are not playing ball with the order. Now, going forward, we will need an SSP as such, but perhaps it needs to be renamed to the People's Space Force as a protection for this planet, and not a secret one either. There's no need for all that secrecy nonsense when the sole purpose is looking after us all. But currently, SSP is a national security risk for every country around the world, and it needs to be reined in. Message to the SSP: quit now or face the consequences. You know what happens now when you violate the peace treaty. I have personally witnessed the evidence of such folly. Your game and control is up. Now come and meet with us and let's chart a pathway forward for us all. We know you have little to no funding left. And we know we can provide it. Providing you step down with your current programme that serves the few and no one else. Funds will be provided when you agree to full transparency and to work with us to protect this planet and release all the advanced tech over to the people. Final warning. A massive sting was brought into operation this week and came to fruition, involving more of the super notes. This time 220 million of them, $220 million, and 7 people were arrested, and they were caught with several different currencies, whole pallet loads of them. So that's another 220 million of their super notes game ended. World Health Organization are behind the grounded planes around the world, more so in America, this week. We have warned, this show has warned previously about them and their involvement in previous viruses and epidemics, all designed to create fear, make the money pour into the pharmaceutical companies which they support, and deliver vaccines laden with poisons and top-heavy viruses. These were deliberate attempts at biological warfare by the World Health Organization, sending people loaded with viruses on the planes for disbursement. And I think it's about time authorities reacted to it, methinks. Way past time. This may tie in also with the Rothschilds' threat at the annual UN meeting last year, that if they weren't back in charge of the trust by the UN meeting, which is this week, this year, they would unleash biological warfare globally. Good luck with that. Next piece. The founder of cryptocurrency exchanges OKEx and OKCoin, Star Zhu, has been arrested by Shanghai police officials this week. Now, what I will say is this is part of an ongoing purge in China to bring down the clown operations, the dragons and the Chinese elders and the others that are playing games over there. They're just as sick and tired of it as we are. I expect more will follow. Which one do we do next? Let's go with this one. On Sunday, following more blocks of the trust funding going into accounts, consequences of actions took place with a twist of humour and a large dose of irony and heavy hammers. Now, around the world, you've all heard about bonds. There's these bonds in this bunker and this vault, etc., etc. And some of them are valid and some of them are not. Some of them have deliberate spelling mistakes, so they couldn't be used. And some of them don't. But the trust knows which ones are which. So, most of these bonds have now matured. In other words, they can't be used. But the bonds are debts owed of money against the bond to the trust. So the trust decided to call them in on all the banks. Now, these bonds are not redeemable or transferable. But all these banks that I'm going to mention were all in negative liquidity after the Hercules incident last week, ranging between 16 and 42% negative liquidity. So Kim and the team decided to bring all banks up to 0% liquidity to balance the books. Except the bonds that were used all belong to the cabal. Oops. As you will find out. The United Kingdom Treasury, 7 trillion in Swiss francs that were housed with the Holy See. 10 trillion in euros out of the Vatican Bank. The European Union Central Bank, 7 trillion in Swiss francs, again from the Holy See, and 10 trillion in euros from the Vatican Bank. The South African Treasury, 7 trillion in Swiss francs from the Holy See, and 10 trillion in euros from the Vatican Bank. So the clowns have to ask each other to liquidate those bonds. Oh boy, I tell you. Venezuela, Brazil and Argentina, 1 trillion each of Holy See Swiss francs and 1 trillion each of euros from the Vatican Bank. Now, these banks can all show these bonds as assets, but they can't use them. They can use it as a balance sheet to show as an asset. Now, JP Morgan, let's carry on with a bit more first. The Department of US Treasury, 7 trillion Swiss francs from the Holy See and 10 trillion from the euros from the Vatican Bank and 80 billion in gold. The PBOC bonds is 1 quadrillion RMB or 150 billion US dollars. The Bank of England notes 2 trillion British pounds. CIA separately 74 trillion US dollars. Russia 7 trillion Swiss francs from the Holy See and 10 trillion euros from the Vatican Bank. China PBOC 7 trillion Swiss francs from the Holy See and 10 trillion from the Vatican Bank. Oh boy. Where do we go next? That's that one. We've completed that one. I feel like Drake, don't I, with all notes. It's just on this part. I didn't have time to get it all down. So the Rothschilds, before I go into the next ones, the Rothschilds told the banks to call in the bonds and try and redeem them. So JP Morgan then went to the Bank of England to redeem them, only to be told we don't have that type of money. I think it was 800 billion they were asking to be redeemed of the debt bonds that was owed to the trust. So now the banks and clowns are fighting each other over redeeming these bonds, and the Jesuits are doomed. Where do we go next? Bank of America. $87 billion capital pledge sovereign owner of 40 billion Swiss francs of Holy See bonds, and 47 billion euros of Vatican bonds. They're all expired, they're not saleable, they can't be leveraged, and they're not callable on. HSBC. 6 quadrillion, I think that is, yeah, in total. And they got 482 billion in euros, 76 billion GBP, and 182 billion in US dollars. Now, due to countless acts of financial terrorism against America, Iraq, Vietnam, India, Indonesia and China, the trust has revoked HSBC's right to hold, trade or transact in euros, pounds or USD dollars. Wells Fargo, liquidity in USD or equal 272 billion, 150 billion capital pledge, which expired from China Treasury notes, bonds, RMB denominated, and 1 quadrillion RMB, and 61 trillion USD dollars, and 61 trillion from the IMF. None of them can be leveraged. They're all expired bonds or matured, or capital contributions. Now, the World Bank can negotiate bonds with the debtor for redemption, but they are not for sale. Wells Fargo. Citibank has been declared insolvent due to fraudulent activities, and the trust is now their interim USD correspondent bank until further notice. We'll have more on Citibank shortly. Bank of England bonds 700 billion GBP, Saudi Arabia 50 billion Rial, World Bank 50 billion, Kuwait 26 billion, IMF 50 billion, embezzlement by bonds of Wells Fargo, totaling 876 billion, and Wells Fargo were 42%, they were the worst in negative liquidity. Those bonds, which are payable by the Bank of England, the Saudi Arabia goons, the World Bank, and the IMF, puts them in a bit of a pickle as well. See how it works now? We remove assets from rogue elements and give it to other rogue elements, who then fight with other rogue elements to get back the bonds that they owe. ICBC, 6 quadrillion in RMB. Citibank, not Citibank, Citibank, 26 billion USD dollars and 178 trillion RMB. China expired debt 127 trillion. UK Bank of England 7.8 quadrillion owing to the trust. Vatican Bank Holy See 68 trillion plus another 487 trillion and 367 trillion in euros. IMF debt 196 trillion with an expired of 96 trillion. The World Bank 867 trillion with an expired 762 trillion. And the UN 460 quadrillion, and the expired amount of that is 76. The World Health Organization 86 trillion, expired 62 trillion, which means they can't use it. And World Trade Organization 48 trillion, of which 27 trillion of that is expired. I think I did. Citibank. JP Morgan, they were given stock loan bonds of ExxonMobil 50 billion, Chevron 50 billion, the Rockefeller Center 28 billion in bonds, so Rockefellers owed them that. IMF 100 billion, World Bank 100 billion, Netherlands 100 billion, Germany 100 billion, Bank of England 800 billion, and France 100 billion. That's the central banks. Like I said, JP Morgan called the Bank of England and demanded their 800 billion for the bonds, and the Bank of England told them, we don't have that type of money. So now the Bank of England are getting rather pissy because the Rothschilds told the JP Morgan to cash in your bonds with the Bank of England. So now they're all fighting each other. Where are we next? Let's see if there's any more on this before we pass on to the next hammer. So Citibank declared insolvent is the gist of that. JP Morgan will follow. The Bank of England is in serious trouble. The Holy See Bank and the Vatican banks will get shut down. HSBC countless acts of financial terrorism have been banned from the right to hold euros, British pounds and US dollars. Just like the Fed. Fed were banned from holding US dollars. So we need to thank Kim and the team for all that. I told you there was a bit of hammers and a twist of humour and irony tipped into it. And if you think that's the end of it, think again. We're going to have a music break and then we're going to come back with more hammers. This is rather fitting. Hi all and welcome back. A couple of things to clear up before we move on. I thought I mentioned it earlier, but it seems some either didn't came in late or didn't listen. The people's money in the banks will be protected. So I don't want any more questions or doubts or fears on that. This is to do with the top end of the banks. I will have a further warning about that later. This piece came in on Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday morning. And I'll read it out as it was said. This came from the top end intelligence. And it says, we are in the eye of the storm. The timeline is still valid after the 9/11 memorial and the execution of indictments using the memorial as a backdrop. All are prepped to implement on all stations for arrest. Sit back and watch the fireworks. Now, that hasn't been unleashed yet, but that's what we're expecting soon. Burning down the house. Oh boy, you're going to like this piece. Due to the embezzlement of public funds, abuse of power under the colour of law, disobeying executive orders of the current President of the United States, Donald Trump, all access to any mainframe by an office of the IRS, both official and unofficial, is hereby suspended until a full audit can be performed. In order to expedite the auditing process, the entire content of the mainframe servers for the IRS are currently being uploaded to the CIA, the Department of the United States Treasury, the real one, FBI, Secret Service, the White House Treasury Terminal, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Government Accountability Office. We took down the IRS. Now, the IRS servers that were taken down were in Puerto Rico, Costa Rica, Washington, D.C., Saint Pierre, which is in Newfoundland in Canada, Alaska, Washington State, Belgium, France, Switzerland, and also Hong Kong. They are now about to be audited. What happens next? We'll see. We did say consequences of actions. They were blocking or interfering with the trust transactions. Furthermore, on the same day, the NSA were also had all its servers taken down in Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Honduras, Panama, Utah, and Calabasas, which is in California. No more NSA games. Now, the contents on the main server of the IRS revealed some rather interesting data, and Mr. Obama will have to, and the people in the IRS will have to explain his sordid antics that came up on the server, and how he was using the IRS like a debit card services for some rather suspect behaviour, parties, travel expenses, which were all facilitated by Obama-appointed people within the IRS. The CIA, the FBI, the Secret Service, Department of Homeland Security and Government Accountability Office have also been notified of those criminalities in those files. Oops. And on we go. What most people won't know is, like most people wouldn't know, that the trust pays the Social Security fund. All your Social Security payments come out of the trust. But the trust, at one point, handed over millions of dollars to the World Bank for development, infrastructure and humanitarian programs. The World Bank spent none of it on those projects and used it to create wars. They, like the UN, the IMF and the World Health Organization, need to be dealt with accordingly and disbanded or fully repurposed. All are criminal terrorist organizations. Now, this week, Kim sent $500 million for development and infrastructure to Sierra Leone. All of it was approved, all of it was verified, and all of it was credited into the bank and the account. Then in came 5 World Bank hired thugs that stormed the bank and blocked the transfers of the fund. They threatened the bank and threatened to arrest people within the bank. Message to the people in Sierra Leone: file a complaint to the UN and send each member of the UN Security Council a copy due to threats on government officials, and we're requesting all other countries who have faced this to file that complaint also. The Trust's message to all the African countries that are being threatened by the Citibank group, and all the South American countries that are being held hostage by the Wells Fargo group, who have also been threatened by the World Bank and the IMF, is to combine forces together and run these people out of your countries and your continents altogether. They're terrorist organisations and need to be treated as such. Citibank. Like I said, they control most of the African banks, and Wells Fargo in South America. These two will be dealt with severely, and here is why. The trust fund placed funds in Citibank in Africa. All of it was cleared, as I've said. The bank admitted the funds were there and decided to put it in a clearing account, and in doing so they delayed the payments. On Wednesday they told the customer they will pay out on Thursday, today. Now the reason being is the Rothschilds and Chinese elders, etc., and dragon groups were due to pay out today by 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. So they told the 4 other outlets that the trust had sent funds to hold back on the funds also. Well, you know what happened next by now, don't you? Yes, no payout. So the customer went for the funds today, and Citibank refused to release the funds. So what happens next? Well, no, we were talking about the bonds that liquidated Citibank back to zero liquidity. We took them back. So that brought Citibank from zero back to minus 42% liquidity. And the trust then called in the debt owed to the trust by Citibank to the tune of 389 trillion, payable immediately. Citibank is now at minus 400 plus liquidity. We also took away their rights to wire transfer money in or out of North America due to breaking all the banking rules and regulations here. Citibank are about to go bye-bye, and messages to all banks who follow that tactic of not releasing the funds to the customer: you will face the same consequences, no matter how big you think you are. You are all in debt to the trust, and we will foreclose on you if you do not play straight. Now, reports are coming out that Citibank still didn't clear it, despite what was done, and also reports of Citibank credit and debit cards are no longer working. Right. Where are we next? The Citibank rights to hold USD have also been revoked, and all funds on deposit in US dollars were converted to RMB for funding Blackwater and Eric Prince to attack the USA. I got it wrong earlier. HSBC's right to hold Euro and GP and US. I know I was right. HSBC's right to hold Euros, British pounds or dollars was revoked, and that was the amount that was removed and exchanged for the Hong Kong dollars. And this leaves the Hong Kong dollar in dire straits as China is refusing to bail them out. China wants rid of the Hong Kong dollar. It's another one of those phony fiat dollars. So I hope that clears that up. Where are we going next? Another warning. Don't know how many warnings I have to give on this, but maybe listening to the last hour or so, whatever it is. There's another message of warning to people who bank with Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, the Morgan Chase Group, HSBC, SBC, Barclays, Goldman Sachs, the Vatican Bank, Santander, Lloyds TSB, Standard Chartered. You are all playing with fire having accounts with those banks. Switch to a chartered bank, not Standard Chartered, or a credit union. None of the above have any liquidity, and some are struggling to even pay their credit and debit card allocations. Citibank, as I've just mentioned, they're not honouring debit and credit cards. They can't pay. Move your money, but I will stress again, no one will lose their money overall. But we don't know how long it will take to get you all your funds back should a full-scale collapse take place. That's the issue. You will get it back, but it may not be in the time that you request it. So I've given you all several warnings now So don't come crying to me or Kim if those banks fully collapse. They have to go down. They're sieving your money left, right and centre. And it's up to the authorities to turf all the top end structure out of all those banks and install some people that are only interested in the benefit of the people and not the corporations and the order and the dragon groups, etc., and the Rothschilds. So we have warned you. It's now your responsibility to remove your money out of those banks. It's not ours anymore. And have cash wherever possible. I'll repeat the names again. Citibank, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Morgan Chase Group, HSBC, Barclays, Goldman Sachs, the Vatican Bank, Santander, Lloyds TSB, Standard Chartered. If you've got money in those banks, get them out. I think that's it. I think that's it on the intel. So I'll recap. The Fed has been put in a total stranglehold. The IRS also. Citibank, HSBC, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan and Bank of America in particular are all in trouble. Their ability to operate in the way they have been operating is all but at an end. I was looking for an update on the piece I said earlier. There is a timeline, and it was hopeful that it would be launched after the 9/11 memorial, where the execution of all the indictments would unfold. All are prepped, ready to implement on all stations for arrest. Now, we were looking for an update today, and from what I gather, it's still in the pipeline. I don't think we're that far away. There has been certain incidents that are going on. Threats here and threats there and all over the place. But maybe, just maybe, we're really, really close now to the arrests of the high level people. And this next piece kind of plays into it. On August the 13th, last month, Trump signed HR 5515. Sections 1033 and 1035 purport to restrict transfers of detainees held at the United States Naval Station in Guantanamo Bay. And Trump said, "I fully intend to keep open that detention facility and to use it as necessary or appropriate for detention operations." Content with that statement, I issued in signing the National Defense Authorization Act last year, and I reiterate the long-standing position of the executive branch that under certain circumstances, restrictions on the President's authority to transfer detainees violates constitutional separation of powers principles, including the President's constitutional authority as Commander-in-Chief. In other words, Trump's telling the clowns, don't interfere. What are we doing for time? I'm going to do this piece, and then we're going to have a music. Perhaps this is fit. Last week, I met one of our members, one of our listeners, and her reaction to seeing me will live long in my memory. The sheer utter joy and excitement that lit up across her whole face. You know, I've always played down my role. But at times doing this work is bound with frustration and much angst, dealing with threats, stupidity, and listening to how psychopaths think that the world is all fine as long as they're in charge. Hearing of this crime and this atrocity can at times take its toll. But then something comes along and reminds you why you do it. And this was one of those moments. Like last year when I played a request for one of the THI's members for a disabled daughter. She liked the Stick the New World Order Up Your Arse song. You know, the sheer joy of that child still stays with me. And this is what it's all about. Making people happy and improving their outlook and well-being in life. People tell me things about me in the show, and I've always kind of played down what I've done. But I've met a few members recently now, and they're all saying the same thing. It was about time I realised my own importance and the impact on the lives other people THI has had and done. But I haven't done it all by myself. I've done it with various levels of support from people like Holly, James, Chloe and Kim. And I don't forget that. But the changes in how people in the group are thinking, acting, caring different since I launched THI has been noted by many. And yes, I will get some credit, and even my humble self can admit that. But it's testimony to you all as well. I can only guide you. You have to walk the path. So kudos to you all for not only listening, but taking on board what I set out to achieve with this group. And we've all come a long way. Now, the member I met has gone through her own personal traumas in life. And she went on a journey of discovery to Peru and did the whole ayahuasca trip and found out for herself the issues, corruption and fraud surrounding that, and made it a personal journey to highlight it. Now, for those of you with long memories, she relayed it all to you on an evening with Thomas. But what most people don't know is she also embarked on another epic journey this year that has seen her drive alone for over 20,000 miles from Southwest America to Northwest America to the Four Corners and all the way up to the northeast of America, handing out thousands of flyers of the work of THI, all whilst living out of a car. An extraordinary undertaking that I'm sure you'll all agree. So the honour of meeting up was all mine, dear. It was all mine. And I and we thank you for who and what you are. Take a bow, Willow Nietzuma.
Thank you.
The record shows we took the blows and we did it our way. Not their way, our way. And our way is going forward at quite a staggering pace at the moment. Yes, there will be bumpy rides. You can't expect a control system that heavily laden with secrecy and compartmentalisation and fraud and criminality to all be dealt with in one smooth swipe. It will go on for quite a considerable time. But now that the trust, all of it got verified by all of the departments, the US Treasury, Department of Justice, the White House, etc., etc. Once we get over this final hurdle of World Bank, IMF, Rothschilds threatening banks, then the funds will be released. Then the fun and games really starts. Now, this has just come in. All the insolvent banks, as prior mentioned, the American insolvent banks, have now been called in to the Department of Treasury tomorrow for an emergency meeting. I suspect we may get a lot of good news following that meeting. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll have another show tomorrow, which will please some. Now, once the funds are released, from time to time I've come up with solutions that I feel need to be addressed so people can think on themselves and maybe come up with their own ideas. It's all designed to get people thinking on the different subjects and the aspects of life that need to be changed. When Kim started the trust, it was designated that there's 489 different aspects of life that has to be improved or changed or deleted one way or the other. Now, one of the things I would like, and we seriously need to look at here in America once the funds are released, is the hidden epidemic of health-related issues in this country. Many people have ignored going to the doctor or the hospitals due to fear of the ridiculous costs that are associated with it. And the same applies to dental care. Now, part of the problem we face with this is the middle and top men issues. The middlemen brokering deals for medicines and supplies that creams money off the sale of the items, and the top people, shareholders, also creaming money out of the system when they do very little to contribute to it. I would love to know what percentage of each item goes to these two groups of what are essentially vampiric entities. I would imagine it's quite high. Now, in a world of over-bloated government, I'm hesitant to add to that list of government tasks. So what I would like to see is something that is set up that runs concurrent with the government only in the role of oversight in some way. Now, all of our essential basic needs in life, like food, water, clothing, health-related and energy, in my opinion, should not be a shareholder-based or middleman-based operations. All of them. Maybe we should look at setting up a people's cooperative to run these essential services for and by the people only. These are our lifeblood services and should not be used as profit-based entities. Now, I'm not against making profits, but the profit should be in line with making the essentials in life affordable to all. Not everything has to be enormous profit-based. That is greed, not need. And these excessive profits leads to fat cat business people. And where there is an excess, it means there's a shortage at the opposite end of the scale, which means the workers. Hence the $500,000 a year shareholders pay and minimum wage for the people who are keeping the company running. That has to stop. But when a society relies on its government for all essential services, it will always mean we are slaves. When the people take their own responsibility for their lives and cooperate, not compete, then we control our own destiny and freedom. I would like all of you to think on how that can be implemented. As the reality is, if we're waiting for the government to implement anything, we'll all be in our graves. The sad reality is the government has been used as puppets for too long. They have no idea how life works, no idea how the financial system works, or the needs of society. Essentially, they're just walking, programmed bots. Now, there may be a lot of good people in politics, but where have they been? Did they have the courage to step out? Clearly not. Because none of what's going on, of the disclosures all around the world on so many levels of society, has come from politicians. It came from us. We drove this movement. And that's what happens with people power. The biggest fear of the cabal, the order, the elite, all the parents and covens and all those clowns, is the people rising up because they can't handle it. And this is what's happening. So we have to take more responsibility. We have to do more. We have to act more. We also have to think different. If you're expecting Trump and the government to fix everything for you, you'll have an awful long wait. We are the only ones that will fix this. We are the only ones that will come up with the right ideas to push not only this country but every other country forward in a better way. They can't even do their own jobs, never mind start new ones. The lack of support that Kim and the team have had from government officials and agencies and military is staggeringly small. They all sit there counting their dinars that are never going to get paid out. You might as well shove them all in the kids' Monopoly game. Same value. Now, another issue that needs to be addressed and looked at, and some people won't agree with this, and that's fine, come up with a different solution, is the patent issues. It needs to be resolved and categorised in different ways. Again, that needs to come out of the control of the government and the military and the deep state and back towards the public. But that means we have to step into those roles. Now, should a patent be part of an essential need for the public, then those patents need to be fast-tracked for release going forward. Whether it's the technology that the SSP have got, or the technology of people all over the world with health machines and free energy devices, you name it. if they're proven to work and to exist, they should be fast-tracked. But I would like to see the patent holder given a one-off payment to cover the costs of their time, plus an agreed extra maybe 10 to 20%. And then that patent belongs to the people and not the government or the military sharks. This is showing an example of being a cooperative and not competitive mindset. You know, there's many patent holders who don't go in it for the money, they just do it out of the passion. But there are too many who want to become the next Richard Branson or Elon Musk, where it's all about getting rich. But getting filthy rich means there's an imbalance in the system, and it creates low wages and poverty at the other end. I think we've all had enough of that. Now, most people collect money like it's going out of fashion. And the reason they do, sadly, is because it's all born out of fear. Fear they won't have enough for the children's college. Fear they won't have enough if they have an accident, injury or a disaster happens. Or the biggest fear is they won't have enough in retirement. All of it based on fear. That's what money brings, fear. If money was the be-all and end-all, why are all the top people, the 1%, all psychopathic? Wouldn't you think it would make them happy going around with fancy toys and gadgets? No. They went psychotic. Now, we've all participated in the money scheme. We have to. But the fear of not having it is damaging to your psyche. And that's something that we, as the Trust, will hopefully eradicate within a short period of time once all these clowns are brought down. But the point is, why do we do it? Is this the way life should be? Where we're all just existing in life and existing in fear? We may or may not reach the promised land, as it's called, but we will never reach it handing over responsibility to think tank groups ran by the greedy, service to self, psychopaths intent on harvesting everything for themselves. We'll only do it by us all standing up and saying, we're not taking what you're offering. We're just not. The power and the choice was always in our hands. We just forgot. We've forgotten far too much. And we need to let fear go. The minute there's a story at the bank, people go into fear mode. Oh, what about my money? It's not helpful. As Kim said last week, there's only two modes in life, fear and love. Which one are you going to be? Are you going to stay in fear all your life? Or are you going to be in love all your life? Whether that be with a partner, your children, or just life in general. Comes down to your choice. Now, I'm going to end tonight. I'm not going to do questions and answers. This is something I said last year, but it's poignant at this time also. And it's not a kind reminder, it's a hammer over the head reminder to the people in so-called power. So I'm going to read what I put out last year. It was reposted this week, and like I said, it's still relevant, and perhaps more so relevant now than it was when it was first put out. Message to the generals, the Pentagon, Langley, the FBI and government officials. This country and its history has been a lie from day one, starting with a fair portion of the so-called Founding Fathers and their special interest groups, the bogus signing of Declaration of Independence on July the 4th, 1776, the same year the House of Bavaria group came into the light with Adam Weishaupt. It was not a coincidence. Within 2 weeks of the July 4th, 1776 document, Britain sent its renewed tax tariff for America, which confirms we never got independence after all. It was all hidden by the sleight of hand. Civil wars in 1812, more bogus bullshittery and staged events, and 1871 brought an end to the organic constitution and a further eroding of any heritage we had. As an addition to that, those two wars in the 1800s, you do know which country came and supported the American people, don't you? Russians. Conveniently forgot that. In 1913, the money people decided to hijack our whole economic system with the support of quislings and the traitors in Congress and other more insidious rogue elements, some of which aren't even human. In 1917, these people threw us into a world war, which was all about destroying Russia and stealing their resources, not to mention eliminating millions of people so they can fulfill their other agenda, rewriting history. 1930, led by the Federal Reserve, they marched us into a great recession for the people while they continued to live the lives of luxury. And no sooner had that died down, then we were led into another war, which was agreed by President Harding in 1923, which was funded by General Electric and the quizzling President Bush, whose real name is Scherf, who, after being found guilty after the war, that whole family was subsequently banned from being involved in politics ever again in this country. And yet we still ended up with the absolute evil that is George Herbert Walker Bush and his idiot cokehead offspring George Walker Bush and cocaine trafficker Jeb Bush, who, let's not forget, was the control of the security firm that was in charge of the Twin Towers on 9/11. IBM, Siemens, Ford, Rockefeller Foundation, Hugo Boss, Bayer, which is Rothschilds, and BMW, all involved with funding the Nazis, this time to collect more wealth in Asia and kill 50 million in the process. Even during the war, the same countries who were allegedly fighting each other were making trade agreements, doing banking restructures and setting up the bogus organisation called the UN. Since the end of World War II, this country has invaded 81 countries at the behest of these hidden vampiric parasites, be it human or not, at great cost to the people of America in terms of finances. And yes, in case you have forgotten, it is we the people who pay for all of your shit. The standing of the country and its people in the eyes of the rest of the world, the sons and daughters of our country lost or maimed in battle. Yes, the same ones you neglect after their usage to you is spent, left with adverse reactions to drugs you administered, untreated injuries, no health support, no financial support, and those you keep stepping over sitting in our streets, here called the homeless. Not to mention the deaths of millions of people and devastation done to their countries, returning them almost back to the Stone Age. All of you sitting there in your ivory tower pushing pens and computers with your phony badges of honour. Message to all those of you with the badges on the shoulders. It is not and never was honourable to kill people, least of all bomb countries with no defence from 30,000 feet. That is a cowardly massacre, and to what end? American freedoms? My arse. No, it's to appease certain gods, hideous non-human entities and their agendas, bloodline families, covens, corporate egregores, occult groups, religious constructs and psychopathic humans whose lust for fame, fortune, wealth and power appears to have no limitation of depravity. That is who and what you stand for currently. That is your legacy to date. All of the above you should all be aware of by now. You know most of your ET connections are now severed. Most of the rest of the control system is now also severed. Most of your banking system is now also severed. So no excuse now that you are being threatened or coerced by this group or that group. You are now essentially on your own with a few psychopathic humans, soul stealers, hybrids and the synthetics. And you still sit there and play the frightened little boy being bullied in the playground. Utterly pathetic. You all now know you've been lied to every day of your lives, just like the rest of us slaves, as we are called. You have recently found out, though, that you are also classed as slaves for the cabal. So you're not as important as you all thought you were. Oh, the irony in that. So are you going to continue to live the lie of being important, or do the most important thing ever on this planet, and not only save the American people, but support the rest of the world of ridding this planet of all the evil perpetrators once and for all? A golden chance of correcting all the ills. It's time you all took that opportunity up, don't you think? Some solutions. Seems you appear to be incapable of solving anything. Remove all rogue elements from American soil first, and I mean all. This can be achieved by staged withdrawal of all our troops in all war zones currently ongoing around the world, and also a staged removal of all our troops and bases off foreign soil permanently. Once rogue elements are removed, the 3 branches of military, hopefully with an addition of a space branch, can start a clean-up of the damaged areas created by troops in our name. The land can be cleaned up by the army, the oceans can be cleaned up by the navy, and the air can be cleaned up of chemtrails et al. By the Air Force and Space Command Group. A cease and desist of all genetic, psychotronic, biowarfare, mind control, cloning, hybridization, abductions, chemtrails, transhumanist agendas, and all other exotic forms of weaponry harmful to us and the planet. Set up a full-on multidisciplined assessment team, including some members of the public, to analyse all technology available as to whether it's beneficial to humanity or not. If not, it should be destroyed. Set up a full-on multidisciplined assessment team, including some members of the public, to analyse all underground bases for full disclosure on their intent and purposes, and whether from a financial or ethical point of view these are cost effective for the public or the planet's benefit, and dealt with accordingly. A multidisciplined team to liaise with all other countries threatened by rogue elements, provide support and logistics for them to complete their process quickly. A steady release of the new technology that has been denied to the people, providing that technology is deemed of benefit by the assessment team. ensure swift release of the funds so we can get many different projects designed to improve this country and rebuild its infrastructure. A cease and desist of funneling taxpayers' money into black budget accounts. Find all the accounts and return the money back to the American government and subsequently the people via tax breaks or direct refunds. A cease and desist to all drug and other trafficking implemented by Langley and others. Locate the accounts, confiscate them and return to the American government, which can all go towards free or cheaper healthcare. A full withdrawal or any connection to United Nations, NATO and or any other organisations who are sieving money out of this country at the behest of the cabal. Shut down the DHS and the NSA. They are Nazi creations to spy on us and, funny enough, spy on you also. Shut down the Federal Reserve and its IRS counterpart, as they are foreign impostors. Restore the organic constitution and make necessary amendments for this time. Restore the American government, not USA Inc. We don't want or need any form of labelled government, be it republic, democracy or any other ism ideology. We want a government that solely operates on the premise of acting at all times for and on behalf of we the people. Nothing more and nothing less. The people are owed that much at least. I came to this country 17 years ago from England. The country that has done so much harm to this one, not its people, but the system. And I've spent most of my spare time for well over a decade now trying to teach and help the American public free themselves from the tyranny of the UK, Vatican and others' control. Even though it isn't my duty to do so. But you do have a duty. You signed an oath to aid and support the American people, and to date you have badly failed to do so. This is to your shame that as an American born and bred here, that you need a Brit to guide or cajole you onto a better path for your people and his country, the irony of which is not lost on me or many others. You all have an opportunity and an obligation now to correct the wrongs you have taken part in. A chance to do the right thing by your family, friends, colleagues, country and humanity. A chance to set a brighter future for us all, free of tyranny and control systems, free of war, poverty, starvation, poisoning. These are the real badges of honour. Helping people, not using them or killing them. So are you going to be the Rothschild slaves or the people's heroes? Your choice. Please make the right one. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. I hope you enjoyed the show. I don't suspect we will wait a week for the next show, but we'll see. The final song is going out to Kim. Bye for now.